Thank you, Carrie. Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
What a beautiful weekend to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King and to be here with the Alphas to do it. First, I want to say thank you to Carrie Clack. You know, one of the saddest days in my time in Congress was when Carrie sat me down and said that he was going to be leaving my office and going to work for Mayor Ivy Taylor. And everywhere he's gone, he has been such an incredible voice for the people of San Antonio and a voice for humanity. Thank you for all of your work over the years, Carrie. And thank you also to the Alphas for inviting me here today. Congratulations on this year, which marks 110 years of your existence and your contributions to American society and so many lives in our country. You know, throughout the generations in this country and the world, there have been leaders who have not only been men and women of principle and of action, but have been folks who have changed the way we live. We think of our own nation and we think of the women's rights movement and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. We think about the struggle of workers and Latinos in California and throughout the Southwest, and we think of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. We look around the world at the cause of freedom and the oppression of people and those who fought to take off the chains of those people. We think of people like Mahatma Gandhi. We think of folks like Nelson Mandela, who for so many years toiled in South Africa and finally prevailed. And when we think of the cause of civil rights and human rights in the United States, chief among those folks, we think of Martin Luther King Jr. And we remember today a man, but also in that man, a movement of so many people who are working to make the promises on paper, the founding documents of this country, make sure that the promises on paper came to life for all Americans of every color and every background. The challenges that Martin Luther King Jr. and those who fought with him faced were incredible. For some of you, I don't have to tell you that because you lived through it. But as Carrie said, I feel as somebody at 41, and many times in politics when you're in your 30s and 40s, you're still called a young man or a young woman. But I think about standing here at 41 and think of all of the work that Dr. King did and the fact that he was gunned down at 39, 2 years younger. We think about the challenges that were faced. The fact that even under the law, African Americans and other minorities were not treated equally. That there was discrimination and injustice, not only in the right to vote, in housing, in education, in jobs, in so many facets of American life. The fact that Martin Luther King took those on, and people like Thurgood Marshall and Rosa Parks, not only marching in the streets, but also making their way into the courts with petitions and lawsuits, doing every single thing that he could and everything that they could together to change our country for the better. That is the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and it's the legacy that we celebrate today and every year. And when we think about the founders of this country and what they promised in our founding documents, we think of the wonderful things that they promised. We as a nation are grateful for founding fathers, but it's true that we've also had shaping brothers and sisters who made sure that the promises of the founders and the promises of the founding documents ring true for every single American. And I mentioned that I am part of a grateful generation, but the other part of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King is that he inspired so many people in the United States and throughout the world. And in that speech in Washington a few years ago, I mentioned that my own parents were inspired in the 1960s and 70s because of the work of Dr. King and so many like him. My mom, who many of you know, as I came into the room, I saw many faces, folks who have been friends for a long time, many of them who knew my mom and some my dad before I was born. They fought for Mexican-American civil rights here in San Antonio and throughout the Southwest. They too grew up in a time where in Texas, you still had signs that said no dogs or Mexicans allowed. They fought hard to change that, and they were inspired by Dr. King. They were inspired by his call to action. And all of us are inspired to change this country because of him. And that inspiration is something that doesn't go away in just a few years. That's why we still celebrate him today. And as you look around our nation, we realize that there's still so much more action to take. There's still so much more promise to live up to. We still need to make sure that the reality of this country matches the promises on paper. We need to do it not only to honor the legacy of Dr. King, but to make sure that every single American has an opportunity to pursue their American dreams. So when I think of my work in Congress and the issues that we faced over the last few years, and I think about the American political system at a time when our discourse has gotten so incredibly ugly, when the leaders of one of the major political parties, the frontrunner of a major political party, has shown hints of fascism in his rhetoric and in his proposals. I think about what that means for the kind of America that Dr. King and so many in his generation and so many of you have tried to create. We are at a crossroads in this country. We must decide whether we're going to continue to make progress and go forward on all of the work that Dr. King promised and delivered upon, and all of the things that are promised in our Constitution and by our founding fathers, or whether we're going to take a step back as a country and give in to the divisiveness and the fear and the resentment that in politics can be so motivating, but to a country can be so destructive. This is a time when we must stand up for the principles that Dr. King stood up for. The bravery that was displayed by those who marched on Bloody Sunday. I had a chance last year to go back to Selma, Alabama, and walk over the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis and other members of Congress, and mark all of the hard work and the bravery that went into shaping our country, to changing it for the better. But now you hear people talk about immigrants as rapists and murderers. It seems like every week there's a video that comes out that shows a black man getting killed somewhere with his hands up or his back turned. That's not the America that Martin Luther King fought for. That's not the America consistent with our founding principles, consistent with our founding documents. One of the things I'm most proud of in Congress is that I have pushed for police body cameras. We got a $1 million grant from the federal government to make sure that our law enforcement officers in San Antonio are equipped with body cameras. I know sometimes when this issue is raised, folks ask if you have an axe to grind with the police or with law enforcement. The answer to that is no. We're grateful for their service. We're grateful for what they do in our communities. I grew up in inner city San Antonio. The year after I graduated from high school, in 1993, if you remember, San Antonio was known as the drive-by capital of Texas. We had 1,261 drive-by shootings that year, more than Austin, Dallas, and Houston combined. Folks in our communities know the value of law enforcement and what they do to keep us safe. But we also understand that having a badge doesn't give you a license to kill somebody for no reason. And so I believe that every law enforcement officer who is patrolling the streets should be equipped with a body camera. That every car that's out there patrolling should have a dash camera. To make sure that we seek the truth and know about the interactions between law enforcement and the community. So that, whatever the truth is, whether it's an officer's account or whether it's a civilian's account, that we know the truth and that we can act upon it. That's all anybody is asking for. Nothing more and nothing less. We think about the challenges that we face in voting and the fact that so many states have passed voter ID laws trying to put obstacles in the way of so many people going to vote. Martin Luther King understood that if we have a challenge in this country, it's not that people vote too much. It's that not enough people go out and vote. We need to do everything that we can. We need to do everything that we can to make sure that as many Americans as possible engage in our democracy, participate, go out and vote, whether it's for the state senate or the state legislature or city council or for the United States Congress or for president. And I say that in a year where we enter the last year of the presidency of our first African American president, President Barack Obama. What an incredible legacy and honor for Martin Luther King Jr. and the people of the civil rights movement is the service of this president. And I'll tell you, because I believe this, that the president has taken a lot of flack over the years. But this president has been one of the most transformative presidents in American history. And I believe that 30 or 40 or 50 years from now, when all is said and done and when the dust is settled on this era, that we will look back on Barack Obama and that his daughters or granddaughters or grandkids will see him on United States currency one day. Now, the caveat to that is if we're still using paper money at the time. If we haven't moved to Bitcoin or some electronic digital version of currency. But we need to do every single thing that we can to make sure that we live up to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. And that means all of us going to vote. Because see, I believe that through voting, all of us can help build what I call an infrastructure of opportunity in this country. And that's what I believe ultimately Dr. King's dream was about. His dream was not just about being able to vote or freedom from being in danger on the streets. It wasn't just about being able to go to school or being able to get a job. His dream was about being able as an American, without regard to skin color, being able to pursue an American dream. For all of us to achieve that, whatever our background, that means as a nation we have to build up an infrastructure of opportunity in this country. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. What I mean is that just as there's an infrastructure of roads and streets and highways that helps all of us get to where we want to go on the road, in America, there is an infrastructure of opportunity that helps all of us get to where we want to go in life. And that includes certain things. It includes things like great schools and universities so that people can become educated and do well. It includes a strong healthcare system so that if you get sick, you don't become debilitated or pass away. And that strong healthcare system includes Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. And no matter what anybody says, it's not going anywhere. And it includes an economy that's built around well-paid jobs so that when people work hard, they can support themselves and their family members. Unfortunately, over the years, somewhere along the way in our nation, it became popular to blame people for poverty. It became popular, instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt, to look upon people who are in poverty as though they're deficient, as though they're wanting, as though they're takers instead of makers. We need to change that. We need to remind our nation about the humanity of folks. I remember my own grandmother who worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time just to get by and to help support my mom. My grandmother was not lazy. My grandmother was doing every single thing that she could to support her family. Yet today, I think she would be called lazy by some, just because she's poor. And so I call on you, and more importantly, Dr. King calls on all of us to make sure that we build out that infrastructure of opportunity so that people can pursue their American dreams. And all of us together can be grateful for every single thing that he did on behalf of our nation, on behalf of our people, and his inspiration for people around the world. Thank you all very much for having me today.